Okay, this is the second half, the last lesson here of Unit 3A, Measurement Basics, and we have the 24-hour clock. So 12 and 24-hour clock. So we talk about, in generalities, the time from midnight till noon is called AM. That's our morning. We call noon to midnight, the afternoon and evening, PM. Okay, so we have AM and PM. One is called ante, one is called post meridian. Okay, one means before midday, one means after midday. Now, most analog clocks have the other numbers with them. So when we draw a clock, I'm going to draw a bigger clock so you can see it. We put the numbers, so we have a 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. The 24-hour clock continues from there. After 12 comes 13. Whoopsie, different color. Becomes 13, then 14, then 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. That's midnight. Okay, so midnight is 2,400 hours. Okay, that's what midnight is. It's 2,400 hours. And that's what they say it as, 100 of hours. Okay, so if we take a look at the 24-hour clock, where do we use this? We often said military. Yes, the military uses this. Where else are we going to use this? We're going to use it at train stations, bus station, airports, and then we're going to say hospitals, anything medical. So also your police and your ambulance. So ambulance, police, and fire. Okay, so the firemen. All of those use 24-hour clocks. And the reason they do that is so that they have more specific time frames so that there's no confusion. If you're in the military and you have something going on at 7 in the evening, you don't want people to mistake that for 7 in the morning, okay? So it's really important. Same with catching a plane. You don't want to make the mistake of 6 in the morning versus 6 at night, okay? So what they do is you start at 1 a.m., you go all the way till noon, numbers 1 to 12, and then starting at 1 in the afternoon, you add 1 to each digit. So it would be 12 plus 1 is 13, plus 1 is 14, plus 1 is 15. So that's how we get our numbers in blue that we see here. So when we say the numbers, we call it as 100 hours. So 700 hours, or you would say 0700, because you actually say the 0 there. So you could say 700 hours or 0700. At noon, you would say 1200 hours. At 2 p.m., you'd say 1400 hours. So these are how we say the time. When we're doing military time, this 24-hour clocks, we do not need AM and PM. That's why we switched to the 24-hour clock. That's so that we don't get confused with AM, PM. So we're going to do a couple practices. So 1 p.m., since it's p.m., I add 12 to the digit. And you always add 12 to the digit if it's a p.m. You add 12 to the digit. So this is going to be 1,300 hours. Okay, 1,300 hours. What time would 3 a.m. be? This is where you would say 0300. Okay, look at the way they're writing these ones. Do you have the dot between them? Sometimes, but not always. So they can write them with or without the dot. So you would have 0300 ... 00. So it depends on if they use the dots or not. If they don't use the dots, that's okay. That's military time. All right. Now let's convert one that's in military time. What do you do to those ones? You subtract 1200. So to subtract 1200, that's going to give me 10 p.m. If I subtract 1200, I'm going to get 10, and I know it's p.m. Why do I know it's p.m.? Because it's after 12. The number that started was after 12. No. Okay, if we take a look at the next one, I want to do 1603. We're doing letter F. 1603 on a 24-hour clock. What would that be on an analog clock? That would be 4:03. So they're changing the 16, you're subtracting 12. 16 subtract 12 hours. That gives us the 4. So that's where we get 4. And since it's in the afternoon, we have to put p.m. Okay? All right, now we're going to talk about time zones. Okay, these are the practices you guys are going to do. So you're going to continue with those practices. We are going to skip towards time zones. So that page was in there by accident. Going on to time zones. Here we go. I cheated, did I? Aw. Okay. Time zones. This is where time is different around the world. If we look at Canada, so time zones. We have time zones in Canada. So the PST is the Pacific time zone. MST, that's us. We're Mountain Standard Time. PST means Pacific Standard Time. That would be BC. So BC and the Yukon. Okay, BC and the Yukon. Here we've got Alberta and the Northwest Territories. Over here, we've got Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Nunavut. Then over here, we've got Ontario, we've got Quebec, and the rest of Nunavut. Then we go to the far right, and this is where we've got that little guy right there, PEI. We've got Nova Scotia, we've got New Brunswick, and then we've got Newfoundland. So Newfoundland is a little bit different than the rest, and it's telling you what time of day it would be. So, for example, if it tells us, okay, example, right here on the left, I'm saying example, Saskatchewan is 5 p.m. I want to know what it's going to be in BC. 600 o'clock. Okay, what would BC be? Well, we're going to take a look, and we see the time, and you're going to notice the time. Right now, Saskatchewan is at 5 o'clock, and you're going to take a look. Alberta goes back 1 hour to 4. What does BC do? It goes back 2 hours to 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. So it is earlier in the day. And why does that happen? It happens because of where the sun rises and sets. The sun rises out in the east, and it takes a while for the sun to make it across. That's why it's different. It's according to the sunlight. How much sunlight is there? Okay, that's why they call it daylight savings time when we have our spring forward and fall back. Okay? All right. So here we go. Time zones. So right here it says the Earth is a sphere that makes one full rotation every 25 hours. A full circle makes 360 degrees in one full turn. And if you divide that by 24 hours, how far does it go in one turn? Okay, so in one day, it's going to go 15 degrees. That's how far it's traveled, and that's how far your sun has traveled as well. So the sun The time zones were created to represent each 15-degree rotation of the Earth. And it follows the sun to make sure that you have enough sun during the day. All right. So it says people in one time zone get their timepieces set to that time. Same as their phones, it'll automatically set to the time of the place you're in. Saskatchewan is 1 hour ahead of Alberta. We have BC is 1 hour behind Alberta. So it says when converting from time zone A to B, this is how we convert. So put a big star beside this. So it says find the difference in the time zone A and in time zone B. If the time is later in B, add the number of hours to A. If it's earlier, you subtract. And we're going to do a couple of those right away here. Okay, we're talking about time zones. So this is the grand time zone chart that we're talking about. So 5 a.m. in Toronto, when will it be in Vancouver? So if we go to the Toronto, Vancouver, that would be from the previous chart. So we would go up to this other time zone for the Canadian one. Okay, so we would take a look, and it's asking us about Toronto versus Vancouver. So Toronto is right here. I'm going to put a big star where Toronto is. I'll put it in yellow. So we're going Toronto all the way to Vancouver. So we're going there to there. They're flying. So what is the time difference? So if they're saying it's 5 p.m. in Toronto, 5 a.m. in the morning, okay, the sun's coming up. So is the sun going to be up already in BC, or is it dark nighttime there? What do you think?
I'll say it's pretty dark.
Well, it is pretty dark. If the sun's coming up here, it's only moving far. It's moving over. The west coast, BC, gets the sun last, which is why their sunset is at the end of the day. We get darkness before they do. So if we've got 5 p.m. and we look at the time difference, how many hours difference do we have here? We have a 3-hour difference. So a 3-hour difference, we go to our last question here. So we have a 3-hour difference. So I could subtract 3. The reason I'm subtracting 3 is because he's earlier in the day. If he was later in the day, I would be adding 3. So if I subtract 3, I'm going to get 2 a.m. in the morning. Now, they're doing it with the time zones on the bottom of the page. Which time zone are you in? Pick that time zone and then subtract the one you're going to. So take a look. So you go the to, subtract the from, and that's your difference. So here's another example. So these are different scales. So this guy's going to be, how do you know which time zone number you're in? Again, it depends. The numbers are up at the top here. Okay, that's where it shows you the numbers. Okay, and that's the time zone differences we're going to use. So time zones and numbers at the top. It says 1 p.m. England. What time is it in Calgary? So we take the to and subtract the from. So I am going to Calgary. So I would have Calgary here, and I would subtract the London. That's where I get it. So I've got Calgary subtract London. So I've got negative 7 hours. So it's going to be 1 o'clock subtract 7 hours will be 6 a.m. So you're subtracting the time zone. That's what you're doing. So what is the hours difference? So how do we know? So take a look. What time zone would people be in? For example, if you're in this time zone, and let's say it's at negative 6, and you're comparing to this time zone, who's in positive 1, you would have 1 minus negative 6, which gives us 7. Okay? So there's a 7-hour difference. 7-hour difference. That's how you use the time zones at the top. Okay? So you're subtracting the to and the from. All right. You are going to practice doing this page, and that concludes our time zone lesson.